What's the most chilling secret you uncovered that proved a family member's accidental death was actually a murder? The smell of sulfur and formaldehyde hung heavy in the air, a familiar scent in Mrs. Hara's third period chemistry class. We were attempting to balance a redox reaction, a task so mind-numbingly tedious that the rhythmic squeak of a marker on the whiteboard was the only thing keeping me awake. Then, a sharp crackle cut through the silence, followed by the principal's voice booming from the intercom speaker on the wall. "Excuse the interruption. Is Daisy Williams present in school today?" My head snapped up. Every student in the room turned to stare at me, a sea of confused and curious faces. My name had never been called over the intercom before. I was a ghost in the hallways, a good student who never caused trouble. My teacher, Mrs. Hara, a woman whose expressions usually ranged from mildly annoyed to profoundly bored, looked just as startled. She fumbled with the intercom button on her desk. "Yes, Mr. Henderson, she's here." The principal's voice returned, but the calm, administrative tone was gone, replaced by something sharp, urgent, and laced with an icy dread.
"Lockdown. Now."
"This is not a drill." The last four words echoed in the sudden, dead silence of the room. The way he said it, the clipped, raw panic in his voice, made the air crystallize. For a split second, nobody moved. Then Mrs. Hara shrieked, a sound so primal and terrified it shattered our paralysis. Under the desks, lights off. "Move,
Move.
move." Chaos erupted. Chairs scraped violently against the linoleum floor as 26 teenagers scrambled for cover. Someone flicked off the lights, plunging us into a disorienting gloom, the only light filtering in from the small, wire-meshed window in the classroom door. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a frantic drum signaling pure terror. Nobody dared to speak, but the same thought screamed in all of our minds: shooter. There was a shooter in the building. And my brain, in its panic-fueled paranoia, latched onto one inescapable fact: the principal had said my name.
He was after me.
Huddled under a lab table, the cold metal pressing against my back, I could hear nothing but the sound of my own ragged breathing and the muffled sobs of the girl next to me. A few minutes later, the distant, mournful wail of sirens began, growing steadily closer until it was a deafening shriek right outside the school. Then the screaming started. It was a single, high-pitched scream from somewhere down the hall, followed by a chorus of panicked voices. Mrs. Hara, who had wedged herself behind her large oak desk, tried to project a calm she clearly didn't feel. "It's okay, everyone. It might just be a misunderstanding," she said, but her voice trembled, and her hands shook so violently she could barely navigate the trackpad on her laptop. She was refreshing her email inbox over and over, her face illuminated by the screen's pale blue light, desperate for an update that wasn't coming. The screaming intensified, echoing from different parts of the building now. Then came a loud, metallic pop from the hallway right outside our door, like something heavy crashing to the ground. A fresh wave of hysteria washed over the room. Whispers of "he's right there" and "oh my God, he's outside" spread like wildfire. My friend Pia, huddled beside me, grabbed my hand. Her palm was soaked in sweat, her grip so tight it was painful. Through the small window in our door, I could see across the hall to another classroom. It was a black void, the lights off, no sign of movement. My own teacher, Mrs. Hara, the woman who once gave a 45-minute lecture on the proper use of a Bunsen burner, was now openly crying, her face a mask of terror. She crawled over to a group of terrified freshmen near the front of the room, wrapping them in a hug and whispering that everything would be okay, a lie none of us, including her, believed. Then we heard it clearly. Footsteps. Heavy, frantic footsteps running past our door. Thud, thud, thud. A morbid, irresistible curiosity took over me. I had to see. I slowly, carefully, raised my head just enough to peer over the edge of the windowsill. Two paramedics in full gear were sprinting down the hall, pushing a wheeled stretcher. I got away from the door as Mrs. Hara hissed my name, her voice a terrified whisper. Just as I settled back under the desk, the classroom door was flung open with a force that made us all flinch. But it wasn't a shooter. It was Principal Henderson, his face ashen, flanked by a uniformed police officer whose hand rested ominously on the butt of his holstered gun. The officer's eyes scanned the room and landed directly on me. "You," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Daisy Williams. Come with us. Immediately." My worst fears slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. They thought I was involved. Or maybe the shooter had sent them for me. Mrs. Hara looked from the cop to me, her face a canvas of confusion and fear. "Get your things, honey," she whispered. In 3 years of having her as a teacher, she had never, not once, called me honey. The casual endearment, meant to be comforting, terrified me more than anything else. As I shakily grabbed my backpack, every single eye in that dark room was fixed on me, a mixture of fear, suspicion, and pity. The hallway was a scene of controlled chaos. Cops were everywhere, their radios crackling with terse, coded language. As they escorted me toward the main office, another paramedic flew past us, shouting, "We're losing him. Move." My classmates were now pressed against their own door windows, their faces pale and drawn, watching as I was led away by police like a common criminal. They didn't take me to the principal's reception area. They bypassed it, steering me into the sterile, windowless conference room. It was only then that the cop finally spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Your dad is here." I froze. My parents had divorced when I was 7. I hadn't seen or heard from my father in nearly 10 years. My confusion morphed into a new, sickening kind of dread. And there he was, standing by the conference table. He looked older, more weathered than I remembered, but it was him. The moment he saw me, his face crumpled. He rushed forward and pulled me into a hug so tight it stole my breath, his entire body shaking with violent, uncontrollable sobs. "I'm so sorry, baby," he choked out, his voice thick and broken. "I'm so sorry." My dad, an ex-Marine who had raised me on a doctrine of stoicism and emotional suppression, was weeping like a child. "Sorry for what?" I asked, my voice small. "What's happening? Is there a shooter? Are people dead?" I pulled back to look at him, and he cupped my face in his hands. They were ice cold. "There's no shooter, baby," he said, and then his composure completely shattered. "There was an accident. Your mom, she was jogging this morning. A drunk driver, a hit and run. She didn't make it, Daisy. She's gone." The world tilted on its axis. The air in the room became thick and unbreathable. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, his voice awkwardly intruding on our private horror. "We were coming to get you when another student, Terrence, fell down the back stairs," he explained clinically. "He sustained severe head trauma. The emergency response for him got mixed with." I stopped hearing his words. A roar filled my ears, drowning out everything else. I stuffed the sleeve of my hoodie into my mouth and screamed. A raw, ragged sound of pure agony. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the floor. The sharp pain as my head hit the carpet was a welcome, grounding sensation, and I slammed it against the floor again and again, trying to beat back the emotional torment with physical pain. Through my own haze of grief, I heard my dad's broken whisper. "She was on her way to the bank to deposit the money for your senior trip. She wanted to surprise you." That night, the world was a muted, gray fog. I lay in my childhood bed in my father's strange, unfamiliar house, staring at the ceiling, my mind a hollow cavern of shock. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but some strange compulsion made me reach for it. It was a text message containing only a video attachment. With a trembling finger, I pressed play. And there she was, my mom, alive and vibrant, jogging down a familiar sidewalk in her bright pink Nike jacket,
Her ponytail bouncing.
Then, a dark car appeared at the end of the street. My mom looked up, saw the car, and did something that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. She smiled. And then she raised her hand in that stupid little salute she always did, 2 fingers to her forehead, then pointed outward. It was the dorky greeting she and my dad had shared every morning during their army days. Even after the divorce, she'd still do it sometimes, joking that it was just muscle memory. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. That was no drunk driver. That was no random accident. My mother knew the person in that car. And whoever it was, they knew her too. I snatched the phone back up, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and played the video again. And again.
And a 10th time.
Each viewing etched the horrifying scene deeper into my brain. The salute. It wasn't just a wave. It was specific, a piece of a life I barely knew. On the 11th viewing, I noticed something else, a detail so subtle I had missed it before. As my mom saluted, the car, which had been approaching at a steady speed, slowed for a fraction of a second. It was almost imperceptible, a slight hesitation, as if the driver was confirming their target. as if they were acknowledging her salute right before they accelerated. Sleep was an impossibility. I spent the rest of the night on my laptop, frantically typing search queries into the void of the internet. Two-finger salute military. The results flooded my screen. It was a scout salute, an informal greeting used by service members, particularly those who had served in reconnaissance units. It was an insider's nod, a silent sign of shared experience, a secret handshake for a club I wasn't a part of. The implications were staggering. Whoever had been behind the wheel of that car wasn't a stranger. They were military. And they almost certainly knew my father. The next morning, my dad was in the kitchen, his back to me, attempting to make scrambled eggs. His hands were shaking so badly that when he tried to pour coffee, a significant amount sloshed over the rim of the mug and onto the counter. He stared at the dark puddle for a long moment before mechanically wiping it up. I wanted to show him the video, to scream at him, to demand answers. But a cold, calculating part of my brain held me back. What if he already knew? What if his grief was a performance? The thought was so monstrous I shoved it down, but it left a bitter taste in my mouth. We ate in silence. Returning to school was a surreal, out-of-body experience. I was a ghost haunting the hallways, and everyone stared, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Mrs. Hara pulled me aside after class, her usual stern demeanor replaced with a soft, genuine concern, offering me indefinite extensions on all my work. I just nodded, unable to form words. At lunch, Pia found me hiding in a corner of the cafeteria. She didn't say a word. She just wrapped me in a bone-crushing hug, and I finally broke, sobbing into her shoulder until I had no tears left. I couldn't face the rest of the day. I skipped my last 2 periods and walked, like a pilgrim to a shrine, to the street where my mom had died. A makeshift memorial of flowers, teddy bears, and rain-soaked cards had sprung up on the sidewalk. As I stood there, a light drizzle began to fall, and I noticed them. Fresh tire marks on the wet pavement. They weren't straight. They veered sharply, unnaturally, toward the curb, right where she would have been. That evening, I gathered my courage and texted the unknown number that had sent the video.
Who are you?
I typed, my thumb hovering over the send button before I finally pressed it. 3 dots appeared almost instantly, indicating someone was typing a reply. They blinked for what felt like an eternity, a minute of pure, agonizing suspense, and then they vanished. No message came, but I knew one thing for sure. Someone was out there. Someone was watching. And they wanted me to find the truth. My father's grief seemed to deepen as the days passed, but it was punctuated by strange, secretive behavior. Late one night, I heard him on the phone in his office, his voice a low, angry murmur. I crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Old debts, he was saying. Obligations must be met. We have to keep quiet, don't stir things up. He saw my shadow under the door and abruptly ended the call. When he opened the door, his face was a mask of false nonchalance. Insurance company, he said a little too quickly. But insurance companies don't call at 10 p.m. and they don't make hardened ex-Marines sound terrified. The next day at school, I used my study hall to dig deeper. I searched for news reports of the hidden run, finding only a tiny, 3-sentence blurb that called it an ongoing investigation.
It was a dead end.
Desperate, I drove to the bank my mom had been heading to. A teller, a kind-faced woman with watery eyes, recognized me from photos my mom had shown her. She told me how excited my mom had been about the senior trip, how she had been saving for months to surprise me. She cried as she spoke, and I left feeling an even heavier weight of guilt and sorrow. That night, another text arrived from the unknown number. It was just an address, 2 blocks from where my mom was killed. I told my dad I was going to Pia's, grabbed my bike, and pedaled furiously through the dark streets. The address led to a small, neat brick house with a video doorbell aimed at the street. My heart leaped. This was it. An elderly woman named Georgia Rhodes answered the door. She said she'd been expecting me. She had been too scared to go to the police, she explained, her hands trembling as she queued up the footage on her laptop. The video was crystal clear. It showed my mom jogging past, then, 30 seconds later, a gray Ford F-150. Georgia paused the video and zoomed in on the back bumper. There was a sticker, a military insignia I recognized from my dad's old photos. A few minutes later, the same truck flew back in the opposite direction, going far too fast. That truck, Georgia whispered. I've seen it before. The driver always salutes my husband. He's a veteran, too. She burned the footage onto a flash drive and pressed it into my hand, making me promise never to reveal her identity. When I got home, my dad was waiting on the porch, his face a thundercloud. He knew I had lied. He started yelling, his fear and grief twisting into a desperate anger. When he grabbed my arm, his grip bruising, I yanked away and stormed inside, the argument escalating into a screaming match of accusations and decade-old resentments. Later, after we had both retreated to our separate rooms, I heard him on the phone again, his voice low and urgent. The next day, I called Detective Holt, the officer assigned to the case. He met me at a coffee shop after school. I showed him the video. His professional demeanor sharpened as he watched my mom salute. He took down all the information, promising to follow up with Georgia immediately. That night, a new, terrible idea took root in my mind. I waited until my dad was in the shower, and then I went into his office. In a box labeled Army Days, I found what I was looking for. A photograph of my dad and 4 other soldiers standing in front of a gray pickup truck, the same make and model from George's video. I snapped a picture of the photo with my phone just as I heard the water upstairs shut off. My dad walked in and saw me with the box.
He didn't yell.
He just sank into his chair, a look of profound weariness on his face. He pointed to one of the men in the photo. "Douglas Butler," he said. "We served together. He's been having a hard time since he got back. Could Douglas have done this?" My dad denied it, but his voice lacked conviction. When I asked if Doug owned a gray truck, his silence was my answer. My investigation had a name now. I found Douglas Butler online easily. A DUI arrest 6 months prior. A suspended license. An angry, bitter Facebook page filled with anti-government rants. Then, a message popped up. It was from a local reporter, Maximus Avo. He'd been investigating a pattern of suspicious traffic accidents in our town and wanted to compare notes. We met at the library the next day. He showed me traffic camera footage from the morning my mom died. A gray pickup truck, with a veteran sticker on the back window, heading toward her jogging route just minutes before she was killed. He told me Douglas had claimed to be home sick with the flu that day, but a neighbor had seen him leave his house at 6 a.m. The pieces were clicking into place with horrifying speed. I knew I had to see him for myself. I convinced my dad to take me to the VFW's Friday Fish Fry, pretending I wanted to connect with his past. And there he was, Douglas Butler, laughing and drinking a beer. When he saw us, his smile vanished. He approached our table, the smell of stale beer preceding him, and clasped my shoulder in a grip that was far too tight. "So sorry about your mom," he said, his eyes glassy. That pink Nike jacket she always wore for her runs, with the reflective stripes, a real tragedy. My blood ran cold. Only someone who had been there, up close, would know those details. I fled to the bathroom and texted Detective Holt. He told me to leave immediately, that he was on his way. But I couldn't. I had to see this through. When I returned to the table, my dad and Douglas were speaking in low, intense whispers. I heard the words obligations and old debts and what happened overseas. Detective Holt arrived a few minutes later, dressed in jeans, looking like just another patron. He sat with us, making small talk, but I saw his eyes taking in every detail, especially the fresh scratches on Douglas's hands. The confrontation came to a head that night. A note was slipped under our front door. "Stop digging or you'll be next." My dad called 911, and a patrol car was stationed outside our house for the rest of the night. At 2:14 a.m., my dad's phone rang. It was Douglas, drunk and rambling. My dad put him on speakerphone and, with trembling hands, hit record on an old cassette player. Douglas confessed everything. He hadn't meant to kill her, he slurred. He just wanted to scare her. She had denied his request for a loan from a veterans emergency fund she managed, and he was angry, desperate. But he'd been drinking, and he was going too fast. He confessed to stalking her jogging route for weeks. It was a full, unprompted confession. Douglas was arrested before sunrise. The case moved quickly after that. Douglas's wife came forward with texts and doorbell camera footage of his drunken, vengeful rants about my mother. He took a plea deal. Vehicular homicide, 15 years, no parole. Hearing him admit in court that he had killed her because she had followed the rules of a loan committee was a brutal, final kind of closure. The aftermath was a slow, painful process of rebuilding. My dad and I, brought together by the shared trauma and the hunt for justice, started to forge a new relationship. He started showing up, not just as a protector, but as a father. He came to my school concerts, met my friends, and listened when I talked. We found a box of letters my mom had written to us after the divorce, but never sent. In them, She wrote of her love for both of us, and her undying hope that we would one day find our way back to each other. On what would have been her birthday, I received a full scholarship to my first choice university. The acceptance letter cited my application essay, in which I wrote about finding the strength to seek justice while navigating an ocean of grief. 6 months after that first, terrible phone call, I put on my mom's pink Nike jacket and went for a run. I followed her route, past the street where she died, to the park where the community had placed a memorial bench in her honor. I sat on that bench, the morning sun warming my face, and for the first time since her death, I didn't cry. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was no longer all-consuming. Her murder had shattered our world, but in the ruins, my father and I had found each other again. We had found the truth. We had found justice. And in our own broken way, we had fulfilled her final wish. We were a family again.